Well, thank you, Kodo, for that heartfelt introduction. Most grateful. And it is really good to be here with you again. Special greeting to the residents there at Upaya and to all those in the Great Cloud who will be listening to this live or perhaps weeks or months from now. So we are making a great mandala together. And thank, as usual, to Bonnie, who supports so much of what happens online, and Mani, and just all the people who make this possible. So the title of this talk is Buddha Meets Buddha. Teachers, no teachers in Zen. It's a big topic. I don't know how I'm going to do it in the next 35 minutes, but I'm going to do my best. And I really want to dedicate this talk to the full health and well-being of Roshi Joan Halifax. Still recovering in California, Roshi, we are sending you, all of us, our great love and vows. And I'd like to start, we're going to be creative here. I'd like to start with showing you a work of calligraphy that hangs on the door of my study just over here, where I'm speaking from today and where I meet with people online. And I think Kodo's taking care of those slides. So if you could put that up, that would be wonderful. So these characters are Buddha meets Buddha. And I'm hoping that by the end of this talk, you might have more of a sense of why this phrase would matter, what it might mean, how it might resonate in our own lives as Zen practitioners. Thanks, Kodo. This calligraphy was done by Professor Shozo Sato, and I had the enormous privilege of studying the art of calligraphy, the Zen art of calligraphy, or Shodo, with him for 8 years, for the last 8 years, before his death in April of this year, just before his 91st birthday. So maybe you can show the photo of Shozo Sato there. So I just want to say a little bit about him. This might seem like I'm coming in sideways in terms of talking about teachers in Zen, but not so much really. So Shozo Sato spent most of his young adult life, born and raised in Japan, actually spent part of his adolescence in Kamakura, as he said, running the streets with the young Zen monks from the many Zen monasteries in Kamakura, which is a very traditional place in Japan. But from the very beginning, he knew that he wanted to study the great Zen arts of Japan, which there are many. And I'll talk a little more about that in a minute. But so he, at a very young age, really was deeply immersed in tea ceremony, in shodo, in sumie, the art of ink painting, in kabuki theater, many arts. He was really a Renaissance man. And he actually wrote this book, one of the most beautiful and significant books, I would say, on shodo, which he called The Quiet Art of Japanese Zen Calligraphy. Imagine my shock when I found myself in central Illinois with such a master. It was quite extraordinary. So Do, many of you may know this, means way, just like Tao in Chinese. And really, most Japanese arts are seen as spiritual practices, and many of them arose from Zen understandings and from the monasteries themselves. Those of you who studied with Kaz Tanahashi know this, and I saw he'll be back in July. Anybody who could possibly have a chance to study calligraphy with him, I recommend it. So Sato-san was very clear about this himself, as you can see from the title of that book, and always said that he was teaching Zen and calligraphy, not simply the mechanics of calligraphy. And he had some really notable qualities which infused his teaching. The quality of care, of generosity, of deep, wholehearted, lifelong commitment to his art and to his students. When he was helping students with calligraphy, and I was one of those students, sitting around a big table week after week, he not only demonstrated in front of us, but he would ask permission if he could, as he would say, dance with us. And he would stand, and Kodo, you can show this photo if you want, standing behind us, actually, and very gently taking our hand. And we had to completely relax our whole arm so that he could dance through the movements of the calligraphy, and we would feel it. We would feel it in our bodies. So not just the eye or the will or the intellect, but the body itself, feeling the movements of a great teacher. Of course, in Japan, the word that is used, it's the word that we use for people with Dharma transmission who are teaching at Upaya, sensei, Kodo referred to me in that way, really just means teacher, quite simply. But it is also a gesture of respect. And I think no one can come into contact with Asian cultures without understanding how deep this sense of respect for teachers is, not just in spiritual life or religious life, but in all areas of life, scholarly, artistic, the martial arts. And in almost every case, Shozo Sato himself may have been an exception to this. It takes many, many years to be recognized as a teacher. One of the people the current director of Japan House in Champaign-Urbana, where I live, Jennifer Gunji-san, has been studying tea since she was a tiny girl. Her mother is the tea teacher, the tea sensei there. And yet when she speaks to students about chado, the way of tea, she says, "Oh, I'm just a beginner. I'm just a beginner," after these many years. And she has gray hairs too. So there's that spirit of always learning that I also experienced from Sato-san. He'd say, "Oh, I was working on a calligraphy and I did it 100 times before I found something that felt right." So even before I went to Illinois and was lucky enough to meet Shozo Sato, I also studied calligraphy with Kaz Tanahashi in California, probably 15, 20 years ago. As you all know, he's also just an extraordinary teacher. But if you've been around him, or even if you've seen him online, you can tell that he doesn't carry himself as anything particularly special. He's most known for his ensos, and we can put up one here. This is actually my own enso. I spent more money on this than I had ever spent on any piece of art. And one of the reasons I loved it, as in general, calligraphy is black on white paper. And this, of course, is white on black, very powerful. And down in you can't read it, but down in one corner, it says the miracles of each moment. So this enso is very unique to Zen. I'm not aware of it being something that's done by people who practice Shodo outside of a Zen context. And it's really, it's done in one stroke, and it's very much the expression of that moment in the artist's mind and heart. And I read a little bit about this recently, and there's actually in Japan, there's a practice of making zendo, making ensos, and the word is hitsu zendo. There's that do again. And one of the major qualities of this practice is shizen, to be without pretense. And I think this is really important when we talk about teachers, without pretense. And we have this in our culture too. Respect for teachers is not unique to Asia. Last weekend, I was back in the Midwest from Washington State, where I am now, to officiate at a celebration of life of a great teacher of theater in my hometown of Terre Haute, Indiana. He taught in the theater departments at Indiana State University for 38 years. And over the course of a whole day of events, many of his former students, some of them now quite famous actors and screenwriters and directors and playwrights, came from all over the country to talk about how he had changed their lives, how he affirmed them and believed in them and what that meant to them. What I was struck by was that it wasn't just what he taught, the nuts and bolts of the theater arts, but the spirit in which he met his students, which reverberated clearly throughout the rest of their lives, not just their professional lives, but all their lives. And this quality of meeting is so much of what makes a great teacher, whether of mathematics or Aikido or acting or painting or tea ceremony or Zen. The other quality, I think, that really matters is love. And Lou Hackelman was the name of this man in Terre Haute. And over and over again, the word love came up, how he loved his students and how they loved him. I felt this very much with Sato-san as well, his love and kindness. I loved him too. And I have experienced this with the Zen teachers that I have been privileged to study with. Buddha meets Buddha together. So now I want to talk about teachers in Zen. In our tradition, we look to the historical Buddha as our original teacher. Maybe some of those here listening were part of the first year, we're now in the third year of the Cloud Zendo community, where we studied the three treasures, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And Buddha is, in many ways, this talk is about Buddha as teacher and the role of the teacher. We did a lot of looking into that in our own lives and in our tradition. But how did the Buddha teach? So the story goes that after his enlightenment, he was in a pretty blissful state. And he wandered around for a few days thinking that there really wasn't any point to teaching because he couldn't replicate his experience for other people. So nobody would necessarily be able to get it. There wouldn't be people who needed to hear what he had to offer. But the Lord of the Gods came down and told him that, yes, indeed, he did need to start teaching. And it's very interesting to me how that occurred. So he accepted that invitation from the gods and started walking away from the area of the Bodhi tree. And the first people he ran into were the 5 guys who had abandoned him in disgust because they were all ascetics and he had accepted a bowl of rice milk from a young woman. Both accepting the food and accepting from a young woman were shocking to these other people. So they'd left him. But there he was, and they could tell immediately that there was something really different about him. And just as Shozo Sato took our hands so that we could feel what it feels like to him to practice Shodo, what the Buddha, before he ever even opened his mouth, he showed something in his body that his friends felt. And so they sat down and listened to him. And that was the beginning of his teaching. And if you've ever had a chance to see the Dalai Lama in person, you may have felt that just the way he moved, just the way he smiles at people, his presence is a teaching in and of itself. And what I love about this is it isn't about trying to teach or trying to be a certain way, just being themselves. And that's enough. And of course, the Buddha spoke differently to different people when they asked him questions. His teaching changed in response to circumstances. And this is the original meaning of upaya, skillful means, which is knowing the right thing to say or do based on being fully present with the person in front of you. And of course, often with the founders of religions, there's someone who picks up the mantle of the teacher when the teacher dies. But that did not really happen for the Buddha. So before and after his death, there were many in the Sangha who helped others, who accompanied others. But the Buddha felt that the Dharma, his teachings, and the Vinaya, the code of conduct for the monks and nuns, would be a sufficient guide. But he also often talks about the importance, profound importance, of good friends in the Dharma, which is the Pali is Kalyana Mita, that these good friends, Dharma friends, are central to the spiritual life. And in many ways, that's what the people, the leaders within his Sangha continued, was to practice Kalyana Mita. There is another story about the Buddha, which is not in the early suttas, but is very important to Zen, although it does involve a person who is in those suttas, Mahakashyapa, who was considered foremost in as one of the disciples. So the story that developed was about Mahakashyapa and the Buddha, and I thought I would just read a little bit from Kazan's Transmission of the Light, one of my favorite books, about this moment. And again, these people already knew each other well, Buddha and Kashyapa, but this is the description of this moment. It's probably familiar to you, and it's in rather flowery language. Before an assembly of 80,000 on Spiritual Mountain, the Buddha raised a flower and blinked his eyes. No one knew his meaning. All remained silent. Then Mahakashyapa alone broke into a smile. The Buddha said, I have the treasury of the eye of truth, the ineffable mind of nirvana, and the formless teaching of complete illumination. I entrust it all to Kashyapa. Because of a smile, not because of words, because of a flower and a smile. So, and Mahakashyapa is considered the first in our Zen lineage after the Buddha. When we chant the names of our lineage, that's where he is to this day. So in our tradition, we talk about warm hand to warm hand. I love this expression. This is the understanding that whatever is meant by Zen can be read about, it can be listened to, it can be practiced on one's own, it can be appreciated deeply, but the spirit of the practice is experienced most directly by the relationships in real time and real life between teacher and students, and also between spiritual friends in many forms. In China, where Zen developed, starting in the 6th century, there is a great focus on ancestors throughout the culture. And wherever Buddhism travels, it takes on the characteristics of that culture. So there is a much stronger sense of lineage in Zen than in the Theravadan Buddhism of India and Southeast Asia. And starting in the Tang Dynasty, golden age of Zen, there were revered teachers with large monasteries, and we actually know from the koans who studied with whom and what happened. And just as we have a family tree, there are different Zen families, and they're related to one another either through a shared ancestor or through a shared practice with the same teacher. Each Zen family had and has its own flavor. Some were fierce and uncompromising, some were playful, some were gentler or more contemplative. And I find even in the West, I can, if I walk into a monastery, if I walk into a Zen center, just by the flavor of the place and how people are with each other, I can get a sense of that Zen family. And one thing to understand is that in China, even though the sense of working with a teacher was so central, it's also true that people would study with a teacher for a number of years and then go wandering, meeting with many teachers and learning from many teachers. So right from the beginning, there was an understanding that sometimes the person who most changes your life is someone you live and practice with for decades. And sometimes it's the person you just meet once on the road. Sometimes the person is a recognized teacher, sometimes not. In one version of the Jukai ceremony, these words are said, "Now all beings are your teacher." But however we understand teachers, it is a great gift to share your practice life with another human being, to be deeply seen and heard, to meet. This is the ideal. Doesn't always work out that way, but that's when it happens, it's a great gift. For me, I practice first in the Vipassana tradition, and there are many of the great elders actually now in the Vipassana tradition that I studied with, including James Baraz and Jack Cornfield, and I feel tremendous gratitude to them. And then I met Norman Fisher, who many of you know, in 1990 and practiced with him for 23 years. And then later with Bruce Fortin, who is in the same lineage. And I received Dharma transmission from him. So teachers have been very central to my own practice life. So that's the teacher side. But I also want to talk about the no teacher side, the Buddha meets Buddha side. And first of all, I want to share a wonderful quote from Suzuki Roshi, which sits on my window directly. I can see it as I'm meeting with people myself. I'll just read it to you here. "I am just trying to help you as a support for your practice. If you stick to it, it means that you stick to the support. But most important is the tree itself, not the support. I am one tree, and each one of you is a tree. And by yourself, you should stand up. When a tree stands up by itself, we call that tree a Buddha. In other words, when you practice Zazen in its true sense, you are really Buddha. So Buddha and tree is one in that sense. It may be that sometime we call it a tree, sometimes we call it a Buddha. Buddha or tree or you are the various names of one Buddha." And I thought I'd read a little Dogen, because what's a Soto Zen Dharma talk without a little Dogen? And he wrote a lot about this. There are many fascicles in the Shobogenzo that talk about this no teacher side of the teacher-student relationship. And one of the most famous is called Only Buddha and Buddha. And he says, Buddha Dharma cannot be known by a person. For this reason, since olden times, no ordinary person has realized Buddha Dharma. Because it is realized by Buddhas alone, it is said Only a Buddha and a Buddha can thoroughly master it. And then from another fascicle, which I love, called Face-to-Face Transmission, I'll just read a couple quotes here that I love. And this is actually talking about Mahakashyapa and Shakyamuni Buddha. A face-to-face transmitting Buddha transmits to face-to-face transmitting Buddha. It is transmitted from vine to vine without being cut. It is transmitted from eye to eye with the eye open. It is transmitted from face to face with the face revealed. And it is like pouring water into the ocean and spreading it endlessly, or like transmitting the lamp and allowing it to shine forever. In thousands of millions of transmissions, the trunk and branches are one, breaking an eggshell by pecking from the inside and outside at once. That's an old idea of what teacher-student relationship is, as if like the embryo inside the egg and the little baby chicken is trying to peck its way out, and the mother's helping from the outside, pecking in. That's what we do together. And of course, now we have Zen in America, and we're babies. We're like those little chicks when you think about the great time that Zen developed in Asia. And it's not clear if some of this Asian understanding, how well that works for us. We are still very young, very immature in our relationship with this tradition. And like all young people, we make a lot of mistakes. In the very kind of early days, 60s, 70s, there really was this sense that teachers were enlightened beings. And you can imagine how much trouble this caused in various ways. And we, in this very short history, we have been heavily impacted by troubling and troubled behavior by teachers, by teacher misconduct, and we can't look away from this. And it's mysterious to me why there are so many cases of teachers using the not inconsiderable personal power and charisma of the teaching role to get their own needs met. Romantic, sexual, financial, emotional. This has happened everywhere. And this is always a risk for any spiritual leader in any tradition. That great intimacy of the teacher-student relationship and the great trust that is given to a teacher is fertile ground for a teacher losing their way. Add to that this thing around enlightenment, you can just imagine San Francisco Zen Center itself was very affected by this. But I think that understanding of teachers has changed, and that there are better ethical guidelines, and there is a clearer psychological understanding of the imperative for teachers to not use students in that way. Years ago, I remember being in a priest group with Norman Fisher, and the first thing he said was something like, well, it's a good thing all of you are not that charismatic, because that just gets you into trouble, which felt like a little bit of a backhanded compliment. And then he said, you know, there's nothing special. I've heard him say this many times, actually, in public as well. There's nothing special about teachers or priests. They're not smarter. They're not wiser. They're not more enlightened. They're not necessarily even more well-trained. They have made a commitment to show up and to see everyone as Buddha. That's it. That's the difference, to see everyone as Buddha. But of course, one of the great things that has happened in the West is the arising of women teachers and a deepening appreciation of the role of women throughout the history of Buddhism. So as Kodo mentioned, this is the hidden lamp. And, this is very recent. When the book came out in 2013, and we met people who'd been practicing since the mid 60s, women, who said that they'd never seen a woman on the teaching seat until the mid 80s for the first 20 years of their practice. And yet there were always women teachers. And some of them were old women on the side of the road, old nameless women. Here's one from China, 17th century, Zhiyong's Ship of Compassion. So Zhiyong was a woman, just so you know, a powerful teacher. A scholar traveled a long distance to meet with Master Zhiyong Chengru. He entered the hall, and he and Zhiyong looked at each other. Then the scholar said, "I've come to visit this Ship of Compassion," her Dharma name. But who would have guessed that the Ship of Compassion would turn out to be nothing but an old crone? Zhiyong gave an earth-shaking roar. "What is this place? Tell me, is it male or is it female?" When the scholar couldn't reply, she said to him, "Come closer and I'll tell you." When the scholar was right in front of her, she grabbed him and said, "From the day you left Spirit Mountain, there has been no place to seek. From this day on, mother and son are reunited." The scholar said, "I trust you completely," and bowing to Zhiyong, requested ordination from her. So Roshi Joan is continuing that powerful legacy of women teachers that goes a lot farther back than we ever realized. And I'll just show you the cover here. You can see it's a meeting between two women in a hut. Buddha meets Buddha. So, I keep asking myself, well, what is a good way for us to be teachers and students in the West that is healthy and life affirming for all? And I have a feeling that I feel this deep commitment, of course, to the great tradition of lineage going back thousands of years, and I would never want to throw that out. But as a teacher myself, I lean towards Kalyanamita, towards being a good spiritual friend, and towards Shizen, that word that means without pretense. We all have a choice. We can feed others' sense of ourselves as something more special than others, or I can show up as someone who loves this practice and walks alongside. Buddha meets Buddha. So I think I'll just close with, because I think it's always good in a Dharma talk to have some practical advice. So I have 10 brief practical points, hard-won wisdom from my 40 years of practice about how to practice with a teacher. So take this with a grain of salt. I might have a different list of 10 tomorrow, but this is what I have. First of all, recognize that there are teachers all around you all the time, most of them not in robes, but that there is also something beautiful in sharing your practice, your innermost experience with someone trustworthy who has been walking this path a long time. 2, find someone who inspires you. Do they show care, generosity, deep commitment to this way and their students? 3, check them out carefully. In this online world, listen to talks, read about them, see how they interact with others, see if they really understand and practice strong ethics as a teacher. This matters. I was very careful about that in my choice of Norman Fisher many years ago. 4, meet with them face to face, face to face. Do you feel seen, respected? Is the person's way of meeting you the right medicine for you? There is this idea of affinity. Do you understand each other? 5, consider whether this is a formal or informal connection. Most teachers are open to both, and it's a different level of commitment when you say, "Will you be my teacher?" This is 6, prepare to be challenged, changed, And if you stick around long enough, disappointed. You will be disappointed by something. I guarantee it. 7, let them be human, but watch for something that doesn't feel right to you. Pay attention to your own wisdom and honor that if that's the case. 8, practice gratitude. Some of the most intense gratitude I've ever felt in my life has been in relation to teachers. But know that the best way to express that gratitude is to continue on this path and to give not only to the teacher or to the teacher's center, but to those around you, to pass it on. 9, if you do need to leave a teacher-student relationship, know that it may be hard, but there are many wonderful teachers in this world, and what matters is to keep practicing. Never let difficulties or disappointments with a particular teacher destroy your love of practice. 10, remember that we are in this together. Buddha meets Buddha. And I'll just read the beginning of the Suzuki Roshi quote to end. I am just trying to help you as a support for your practice. If you stick to it, it means that you stick to the support. But most important is the tree itself, not the support. Thank you so much.